Well, welcome back to Builders, Makers, Doers. I'm Andy Bassett. That's Elliot Bassett. We have Zach Lubeck with us from Quality Pork, and it is an incredibly cool company. I'm really excited to dive in.
Let's build off that. All right, excited to have you here, man.
Yeah,
it's been a while getting this lined up.
Yeah, it's easy to come in and talk about myself and kind of something I've been doing my whole life, right? This is going to be fun. I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, well, the audience is going to find out you've known this business. It's a family business for a long time.
So it is. So, yeah, working for a family business is a little unique in that, your boss is at Thanksgiving. You make a mistake, you hear about it. It's great, though. There's a lot of pros and cons of working with family business, as you guys know.
Yeah, it turns out we can relate.
Absolutely. Well, walk through, that piece of it, the history of the company, how your dad got involved, because I think if I remember right, the history of the company goes even back before
That's correct.
Your family. And so just, give us the history, how you guys got to where you're at today, and then we'll kind of dive into some of the stuff.
Absolutely. So Quality Pork International is a ham fabrication company and kind of who we are today. We've got capacity to go through about 1 million pounds of hams a day. So we separate. Yeah, exactly. So it's the equivalent of about 20,000 pigs per day. So each pig has got 2 legs.
Yeah.
So it's going through about 40,000 pieces a day. It's kind of what we're going through. Ultimately, we separate the skin, the fat, the muscle, and the bones, and send the different parts and pieces to different ham and deli sausage manufacturers globally. So the base of our business is being the low-cost provider of ham and sausage raw materials globally. So about 2/3 to about 3/4 of our business leaves the United States. So we've got, think of the really, like an example of our customer sets would be, if you ever have a ham and cheese sandwich at Subway, if you ever buy a Hormel branded ham, a Dietz and Watson ham, name any major deli brand domestically, but then start to think on a global scale. So it's kind of...
That's crazy. How'd your dad get involved?
So the company goes back to 1983. It started with they had a single supplier and a single customer. And that supplier basically said, hey, we can't get this job done. What can you guys do to make this happen? The guy who started the company, his name was Jim Jeffers. He had bounced around and had started multiple processing and slaughter facilities throughout the Midwest here. He working for a couple different companies. He ultimately made a lot of other people a lot of money and really did a good job at that. And what he saw as a business opportunity was that, historically speaking, slaughter facilities in the United States are in small town, very small towns. Large cities like Omaha, especially in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, the large cities were kind of pushing away from that, whether that's, the smell, other nuisances, things. There's a variety of reasons why large scale cities were really kind of stiff arming that type of business. Yeah. Whereas in small towns throughout Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, places like that, they welcomed it with open arms, saying, hey, you're going to open up a facility that's got 2,000 jobs plus all the ancillary jobs with it. Yeah, please come on in. So what ultimately happened is Jim noticed that with labor being a constant strain in these smaller towns, the pool of labor at these harvest facilities always pulled out of the ham boning side. So obviously there's an order of operations that has to happen in meat packing. The animal has to get to market weight and be healthy, arrive to the slaughter facility alive and doing well. Then you have to get the animal killed. Then you have to get the animal cooled. Then you have to get the different parts and pieces broken down. So there's a very clear order of operations and things that happen. So if you're ever short on bodies, you've got to pull people upstream in order to do anything.
Oh, yeah. So
what he noticed is that a lot of these facilities, the largest pool of labor with the lowest return was always coming out of the ham boning side. So he theorized that if he could create a centralized location in a larger population, Omaha, that is still within a day's drive of all these suppliers, ultimately he could do there's a couple different things that he could do. He could drive up throughput, drive up yield, and drive up consistency by being hyper-focused on the back 2 legs. So we're an incredibly niche business from the beginning. Yeah. And that, that's all we do, is deal with the back 2 legs of the pig. We're very specific. We only have about 100 to 150 potential customers in the world. It's really pretty unique. But anyways, Jim started the company in 1983, had 1 customer, 1 supplier. By the end of about 1985, he had 2 customers and 2 suppliers. It was really exponential growth there at that point, right? And then, so Jim was an incredibly intelligent person, knew a lot about how really the world worked. He had an abundance of logic and reasoning in his repertoire. And being around the block, quite frankly, growing up in the meatpacking industry in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, it was a different world. Yeah, it was a little bit rough, but it required a lot of just an abundance of common sense was very important to him. My father met Jim when he was working at Lutz here in town. Ultimately, my father was acting as a third-party CFO to the company. So implemented a lot of basic financial controls to the company to really keep that it was becoming a large business and the way that they were doing accounting, as I hear it. I mean, I was not even in kindergarten yet at this point, but as I understand, they were kind of doing like cash basis accounting in the 1980s. And it's like, well, Uncle Sam's going to not like that. You know, you need to get up to generally accepted accounting principles. And not for nothing, protect themselves, right? It's, I mean, the opportunity for fraud and people, skimming off the top, it's always there, right? So implementing basic financial controls and doing things can really help you understand your costs, so you can understand your business, so you can know what to charge. What do you have good customers? Do you have bad customers? Things like that. So my father was able to go in, implement a lot of different basic financial controls for him. Was working with Jim for quite a while. On December 21st, 1993, my dad was working with Jim to ultimately sell the company. Jim started the company when he was 56 years old. He was 66 at the time. And said, hey, I need somebody to help. I'm done. Like this is, I've had my fun. I've made my money. I need to pass this thing forward. And my dad helped come up with a valuation of the company of X. I don't know what it was in 1993, and was helping him find a customer. He's ultimately kind of acting as a headhunter, trying to broker a deal between two different groups. Found a group that was actually willing to offer a multiple of X. And Jim was interviewing these folks as if he was hiring them, because ultimately the company was his family, right? He spent countless hours at this facility getting it going. Knew everybody, knew their whole store. It's absolutely his baby, and he loved these guys. Absolutely loved these guys. It came down to a one individual that they weren't interested in retaining, and he goes, "Well, that's not going to work. That guy's in my family," and ultimately he turned my dad.
The deal up.
Exactly, blew the whole deal up over this whole thing. So the guy turned to my dad and goes, "Hey, it's December 21st." I only know that because this was my 5th birthday. My dad tells the story all the time. He turns to me and goes, "Hey, I'm going to Cancun on January 15th. You've told me it's worth X. Clearly, we've got somebody who's interested at this value. I want you and my son-in-law to buy this thing." So my dad's like, I think that was a pretty long Christmas for him. I mean, Nebraska lost to Florida State. We missed the kick there. And he decided to, really push it all on the table and risk it all. I mean, he had a very comfortable life at Lutz, he was one of the earlier partners at Lutz, and which obviously has grown to be a tremendous company here in town.
Yeah, absolutely.
A very strong regional presence across a whole lot of things. So it's kind of like, hey, do I stay with this thing that's a proven winner, or do I push it all into the table and see if this is something that we can go for? He decided on January, I think 14th, I think it was probably the day before, he's like, all right, can I even borrow the money? Like, is it, what
feasible to do?
What equity can I even put on the table here to stand up alone against this thing? Stood it up, ultimately bought it with a partner. That partner and his family has since left the facility, or left the business. Our family's now the full owner of the facility. Wow. So it's been kind of a wild ride over the course of almost 40 years now.
That's incredible.
A little over 4 years.
Yeah, that is cool. So one of the things that you kind of glanced over is just the hyper niche, which I didn't even know that you were that hyper niched, and that you think that, I guess you just process a pig, but it's much more complicated than that, which I know.
It becomes very nuanced. Oh,
yeah, and just being able to, focus on a part of a pig and be able to, build a business out of it is super interesting that he saw that opportunity and then was able to be committed to it and grow, the start of the business.
100%. Yeah, it was, and he absolutely took a huge risk in doing it. I think it was a very calculated risk in that he knew all the players in the game. And he saw that this was an obvious problem.
Yeah.
Throughout the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of labor concerns, quite frankly, in the U.S., specifically in the upper Midwest, in the northern Iowa, southern Minnesota areas. There was a lot of concern and quite frankly, unrest in the facilities with as facilities were either becoming super unionized or going away from the unions. And there was a line in the sand there that people needed to decide which direction are we going to go with this.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, that is. I picked up on the same thing you did. The back half of the pig, right? Super niche. But so maybe it's a wild story. It's fascinating. It's really cool. Now we're talking about the 80s and 90s then.
Correct.
Fast forward to where we are today. How different are things? How similar are things? Like, how do you put in perspective that history to what the business is today?
Yeah, for sure. So I said our core operation there in fabricating the pig or fabricating the hams, where we're separating the skin, separating the fat, the muscle, the bones. There's been incremental growth and changes in all that whole thing. But ultimately, what really made QPI very successful is Jim was the Henry Ford of paste deboning. Because historically what happened is, the four of us in this room would sit down, everybody gets a knife, everybody gets a ham, and you do the whole thing.
Yeah.
And he figured out a way to send product down the line and say, hey, every 6 seconds, you're doing one single thing, just over and over. We're asking them to do it 10 times a minute. Whether it's make a certain cut, trim a certain ham. We figured out the ways to do that, and there's modest tweaks within that. But that was really the monumental step forward that he did to be able to drive up throughput, to be able to continuously do yield improvements and consistency improvements. Because it used to be that the four of us would all have different ways that we do everything, right? And we'd get paid by the piece at the end of the day. So this was a way to pay people by the hour, ask them to do really to simplify their job, and ask them to do something very. It's ultimately manufacturing, but we're disassembling. We're disassembling an animal at this point. So it's what Henry Ford did in reverse. Yeah. So that was our big step forward, and that part of our business has really maintained the same. Our reach globally has grown a ton. We really took a monumental step forward in the late 90s, early 2000s, as regulatory environments, as quite frankly, as free trade really opened up. Things like NAFTA came into play in the mid 90s. The Australian market opened up quite a bit for us in the early 2000s. The Japanese market's been kind of in and out. Right now, they're very much, from a regulatory perspective, in a position where they're much more in a free trade agreement with the United States. It's not the Trans-Pacific Partnership that was originally proposed, but it's ultimately it's a bilateral version of that, as opposed to all those different groups. So I guess our honey hole of sales really is in the Pacific Rim. So we're in Australia, New Zealand, Korea, Japan, Vietnam, Chile, Central America, Mexico, Canada, obviously the United States as well. So it's really where our strengths are. We've changed a lot of things in terms of like how we export things. In 2008, we implemented our own blast freezing system. So at the time when we built it, it was the largest blast freezer in North America. We can go through about 1.5 million pounds in it's 26 hours. I want to say it's 24 hours, but really the math kicks out that ends up being 26 hours, which is actually greater than our cumulative capacity. We were the first people to really start to implement other technologies from other industries into the meat packing side and get our product frozen really quickly. Ultimately, pork doesn't get better with age, so you need to stop the aging process quickly or eat it. Those are kind of your two choices. So you got to work quickly. So we were able to make some pretty big and innovative things to do that, and accordingly, we're able to make a better product for our end users and drive value that direction. So that's a big step in our core business. And then in 2018, we purchased another facility in West Point, Nebraska, which was previously a customer of ours. So it was the Wimmers branded hot dog, the Fairbury hot dogs that they shoot at the Husker games, things like that. The Wimmers family sold their brand and their company and their facility in 2012 to a larger, a multi-billion-dollar deli company based just outside of Chicago. That company decided, they came in, they had excess capacity in their other three facilities throughout the United States, and they ultimately closed it down. Exactly. I mean, they had excess capacity. I think they kind of saw Wimmers and Fairbury as a competitor, so they more or less bought the competitor, kept the brands, and shut down the facility. Yeah. And we've got a great relationship with that group still to this day. So it's not, definitely don't speak ill of them in the least, but it was a unique situation where we approached that group in 2014 saying, hey, we're interested in buying the facility, as they announced that they were closing this thing down. And so we met with them, came up with a bid price of X, and came to them, and they said, well, that's great. What are you guys going to do? We're like, well, we're going to put the band back together. Like, all the production people are still in West Point. So we thought we were ultimately going to launch a deli brand. They said, hey, thanks for being honest. No, like we're not going to spend. I don't know how much they ended up spending on the company and the facility, just to basically birth a competitor who is vertically integrated at that point and can supply them and get going. So they said, thanks but no thanks. That facility was shut down for about 2 years, and then a startup group went in there who was very early in the treat your dog like your child category. So it was basically human grade pet food and pet treats. Yeah. And we were selling raw materials into that group, a small deal. Those guys had a pretty good idea, in my opinion, were modestly poor operators, and they ultimately ran out of money. And we were able to take the facility out of bankruptcy. And we thought we were going to launch a deli brand. COVID happens, and we inherited this pet treat company. And honestly, it's one of the best things I've ever done. Did not know that I wanted to be in the pet market. It's a tremendous market for us to be in. It really plays to a lot of our strengths in terms of consistency, throughputs, things like that. And we always preach to our team, hey, treat the food that you're making with as if it's going to go onto your table. It's the same idea with the human grade pet treats and pet food. Is, hey, treat it like you could eat it, or like you want it, or that you're going to be giving it to your pet. Preaching that mentality has worked out great. So that's been a different adventure. I've got probably a PhD in what not to do. 100%, But that's been a different challenge, but it's also a vertical integration play. So we're able to feed a lot of some of our raw material up into that facility. It hasn't worked out anywhere near what we planned on paper in 2018. Nowhere near it, actually. But it's been really good, and I've learned a ton from it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's business in general, right?
Right. I got to get in the arena.
I'm super curious that the international space, we've had a lot of conversations around that I get so interested in, because there's way more moving pieces. But like go back, and obviously it was before you were there, but in what how did you get your first international customer? How'd that even happen? That's what I don't understand.
Well, so one of our biggest accounts in Mexico is a group out of Texas. That's a trader that's got his own distributions. He's got multiple distribution centers. His largest one's down in Puebla. He was actually visiting a different customer in Omaha, saw our sign, and came and knocked on the door.
No way.
Yeah. It's actually, he was calling me as I was walking in here. He's one of my dad's best friends in the industry. But yeah, he came and knocked on our door.
Wow.
Like saying, hey, you got, what do you do?
Yeah.
Like, tell me about it. I mean, this would have been, so I think NAFTA went through in 1993. It was implemented in January 94. This would have been in the summer of 94. And so my dad was just brand new, fresh into this thing. He was a nerdy accountant, didn't really know what was going on in the meat industry. It was kind of almost to close his door, focus on the books all day long, and then all night long try to learn what's actually going on in this industry. So that group, that was a wild situation. They're a tremendous customer of ours, and we've got a 30 some odd year relationship with that group, selling different byproducts into Mexico. So that was how Mexico got started. Australia, we were able to kind of read the tea leaves and we were able to figure out that from a regulatory perspective, as Australia opened up their free trade, or not entirely the free trade, we were able to learn kind of what the requirements were on your product down in that direction. We were able to meet some folks just through reaching out to, it's kind of obvious who the big players are in different industries because it's all retail data, right? It's like, brands A, B, and C are produced by X, Y, and Z. And so you're able to kind of figure that out. Ultimately, we were the first U.S. pork producer to send product into Australia. And that very first group it was Aquas at the time, which is the USDA, or the Australian version of the USDA. They were doing the inspection. There's all sorts of trade barriers involved in it. So, you couldn't have any bones in it. You couldn't have any sort of glands or things like that, which are common. These are natural animals. They have bones. Yeah. They have glands, right? So it was our job to make sure that we were able to remove all those items. But those first couple containers that went through that process were just a massive inspection. And I think because everybody knew it was going to be such a massive inspection, I think a lot of the major packers said, we're not interested in playing in that. The value for them isn't in doing it because the risk was too high. Hey, if a product gets to Australia and it's not up to snuff, there's no bringing it back. It's garbage at that point. Your risk is total. It's the total value of the order. And we were able to stick our necks out and kind of say, all right, we believe in our process. We believe in our know-how, our knowledge to figure out what needs to be done and how to deliver upon it. And it turned into a tremendous market for us. And for the longest time, we were the largest U.S. supplier into Australia. We no longer are. One of our suppliers / competitors / customers. The incestuous nature of the meat business is endless, right? But we've had there's a group that ultimately bought our largest customer, and they worked together with. And not that we got pushed out because we still have a presence there, but we're no longer the largest down there. But we still have. Compared to from a nominal figure, we're way bigger than we used to be. So, and their imports from the United States are way bigger than they used to be. Yeah. Well, when it was zero, it's pretty easy to go up from there.
Yeah, no kidding. And you spent a lot of time in Japan.
A lot of time in Japan. Yep. So we do a tremendous amount of work in Japan. That was really
Different
kind of
cultures.
old. Our business in Japan has kind of gone through a variety of different trading groups and trading outfits that all have a little bit of equity in it. Japan's very unique in that there's channels into different distribution and endpoints are almost sacred. Japan's a fascinating place and a fascinating culture to do business in. There's a lot to it from a relationship standpoint, from a continuation of business. There's a lot to it. The Japanese have got, it's stereotypical for her, but they really have 100-year, 200-year visions on how these things look at it. And whereas, in the United States, it's quarter to quarter at the longest. So it's a very different way of looking at things and doing this for the better and for the worse, for sure. But that was really just kind of a lot of existing relationships we had. We're like, hey, what you guys do would make a lot of sense in Japan. Have you considered it? And we said yes to a variety of different channels and have gone that route. And we've had very good success over there.
Yeah, and I was curious kind of how you deal with the different cultures and everything, because I'd imagine that's a learning curve. I remember you telling me stories about Japan, and isn't it in the business culture? They do a lot of business over dinner and drinks, and you kind of have to go through the dinner and drinks.
Massively social.
Yeah,
massively social. Yeah, absolutely. And it goes all the way through from their sales team to their production team to the traders in the middle to the people at the port to. Obviously you're not like bribing government officials or anything like that, but you need to have conversations with them. Like everybody, it's almost an egalitarian way to look at it, to be honest with you, which I really appreciate that. Hey, we need everybody's buy-in. We all need to be pulling the rope the same direction here, which I think it's a tremendous way to look at it.
Yeah.
And to keep it social and to keep it, and keep it honestly very personal.
Yeah.
It's something that we thrive at, being a small family owned business that is competing against large, even multinational conglomerates that have, fingers in every different direction.
Yeah.
They're doing processing, they're doing, some are grain traders, some, they do all sorts of stuff. We're hyper focused on it. So we've been able to have a lot of success in building those long-standing relationships with it.
Yeah, that's
Do you have a particularly cool story that sticks out in your mind?
One that I want to share.
Yeah.
Right. No. I mean,
There's no real rules in
right?
here, so
I mean,
share
it's one of the most stereotypical things is just doing karaoke over there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
really.
a massive deal,
Yeah, okay.
and I am an abysmal singer. I'm completely tone deaf. I've had some absolute bombs over there. I'll be pretty well liquored up, drinking, dancing, singing, and it gets on video, and it's bad. It's really bad. But
It's like a random
but the deals are still getting done.
get the sales. That's it. I'm a salesman at heart, right? So we gotta go out there and get the sales. So
That's
no,
funny.
yeah. I mean, when it comes to sales like that, the answer for us is always yes. The hard part of my job is finding out what the question is.
Yeah.
That's what can we do to be different than the large guys? I like to say that we're not wealthy enough to be cheap. So if it's a race to the bottom on price, we're never going to win. I mean, we're competing against, Tyson, a Cargill, a JBS, a Smithfield, these companies that are doing tens of billions in revenue. They can get, they can really get cheap if they want to. If they want to market, they can have a loss leader and do it for a long time. It's almost, I'm not saying it's like a Standard Oil approach where they'll lose money forever just to squeeze me out. It's close to that.
100%.
It's something they really want. So I need to be hyper aware of what my competitors are doing, because on the other, when the shoe's on the other foot, a lot of my competitors are also my suppliers, which is a very tedious balance that we've got to maintain.
So on the heels of something you just said there, obviously you've had some good fortune in the business. The West Point facility and how that worked out, and diversifying into another product through that process was, that worked out well. Or a guy knocks on your door and you end up international, right?
It's wild.
What are the big challenges? What is the stuff that would keep your dad up at night in the business?
Sure.
Or just as
this year's had a unique perspective on it with all the political climate. There was and kind of still is a pretty strong anti-American sentiment in certain pockets in certain areas of the world. So for us, it was the ambiguity of what was going to happen from a trade perspective. I mean, obviously, we're exporters. At the end of the day, we make American goods and we try to sell it to the rest of the world. That ambiguity that we saw really from April until end of July into August was really hard. It's kind of the will they, won't they, what's the reaction going to be? It's not necessarily that U.S. slaps tariffs on somebody else. It's more the retaliation that we were watching out for, or what could happen, with the relations with Mexico. A lot of my biggest competitors for my raw material are down in Mexico. So if something were to swell up at the border, I could be the beneficiary of that. Or the opposite would be, hey, the U.S. and Mexico are all in on a trade agreement. We're going to be moving a lot of the stuff. A lot of pork from the U.S. is going to be going down into Mexico. So it's really kind of a hard thing for me to do, or the thing that I guess it makes me lose sleep because I have no control over it.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of times there's unknowns that are unknown. What's the chain reaction going to be down the line? If the U.S. puts a tariff on tomatoes coming out of Mexico, is the retaliation in Mexico that they're going to put tariffs on hams?
Yeah.
Because in 2016 or 2017, that's what happened. It's just stuff that you'd. In retrospect, it's like, oh, that makes a ton of sense. Trying to see that out in front, see how the dominoes are going to fall is massively challenging. And you can say the same thing from a foreign exchange perspective, from a currency. It's really hard to deal with foreign currencies.
Yeah, and what's so wild there is every 4 years, it has potential to completely shift with the new administration.
Completely, yeah. So that's a hard thing. I mean, it's something that keeps me up at night thinking about, the long-term, viability, keep our company as a going concern. It's always something that's going to be in front of my mind. I mean, obviously I'm confident that we're still going to be around in 4 years, no matter what happens, but you just never know. There could always be something that happens that, something happens over here that triggers dominoes to start falling, and all of a sudden we're caught in the crosshairs. I mean, a great example of that is the U.S. and Australia have always had really good relations. We've had some concerns with different government inspectors who are allowing their own personal politics to get injected into what's going on. So they're creating
harder to get product in.
Exactly, a non-regulatory barrier essentially.
Yeah.
So it should be a product or a container should get inspected down at the ports. It should take 45 minutes to an hour on the absolute top side. In April, May, we were having things that were taking days.
Whoa.
It's just an intent. It's almost like a work slowdown, not a stoppage type deal. Like in union negotiations, it's a tactic kind of like that people, they're,
they know what they're doing.
Inspector XYZ. Well, this is an American product. These people, I'm going to stick it to Trump by sticking it to these guys, which I inject your own personal politics into that one. It's kind of like, all right, whatever they think. I mean, ultimately, it's not we're able to navigate through it and figure it out.
Yeah.
Which is just stuff that we need to be aware of.
A little stressful when you have a perishable product too.
Very much so. Yeah. Sell it or smell it for sure. It's a concern. And then also, we do a lot of our terms delivered to a port. And really what that means is ultimately it needs to clear customs, and then our customer takes possession of it.
Okay.
And so we're still on the hook during that.
That's still your product.
That's
that risk
still
is
our product,
100%
still on us.
yours.
Exactly. Until it clears inspections, through customs, it's still on our books.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that you kind of mentioned it, and I think this is always intriguing when we have these conversations because we learn a lot about how businesses actually operate.
Sure.
And I think when you get into it with business owners and you actually learn, how do you make money? How do you create profit in your business? It's oftentimes not what we see from the outside. Because a lot of companies might be doing it, and I know that this is somewhat of what you deal with too, which I'm curious your perspective is like, we might look at it and be like, well, you sell hams. Yeah. Like, that's how you make your money.
Right.
And it's like, well, that's not always how we generate our cash or especially profit. It can be a lot of times on dollar arbitrage or, we were joking around like you're basically a commodities trader. Like, talk through that because it's a whole nother element to the business that isn't just breaking down pigs.
For sure. So what our skill set really is being nimble and being quick. So if there's an opportunity in the market, we're a tiny little speedboat who's competing against giant cruise ships or giant battleships, right? So you've got large packer A, they're doing $10 billion in revenue. They've got the entire pig to deal with, and there's little pockets of opportunities. You're like, hey, you can make $1 million here, you can make $10 million there. And these guys wouldn't touch that. It's not worth changing their large scale operation to go and to jump into a small to mid-sized market and say, hey, this is where we can make. I mean, to us, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, 100%.
To a company that's bottom lining $10 billion, whatever. It's not worth the risk.
It's a rounding.
Exactly. Yeah, they quite literally spill that on a daily basis, and it's okay. It's just an accepted part of who they are and what they do. The other thing on our approach to business with our customers is doing things that other people are unwilling or unable to do. So I joked earlier, my answer is always yes. I got to figure out what the question is. So I like to come to new customers with ideas or questions saying like, what would be the best product for you? How can we make, you can come up with any of the byproducts that come off of our process. Say, hey, how can we make this the absolute best thing for you? So either, a more consistent product, take people out of your process. Yeah. There's a whole variety, use your imagination and come up with ways that can work best for them. And we like to find long-term partners that say, hey, this is, if you could do this, it would help me quite a bit because of that. Yeah. And we're able to go through and able to say yes to people and do that and then work our way backwards into costs. And we're very transparent in our costing mechanisms and things like that. We've gotten a really strong grip. My father's got an accounting background. I've got an accounting background. We've got a really strong grip on what our costs are. Yeah. One saying my father always drops is that, if you don't know your costs, you don't know your company. And so you have to understand what you're doing. And for us, the answer is always yes until proven otherwise. So we'll give something a shot. Like, hey, size out these animals or trim them out this direction or go. There's a whole variety of different things that we can do. Or even what we've done a lot recently is bring our customers' processes into our facility. So we send them a ready to use product at the end of the day. So they're able exactly. So they're able to. So a big concern in our industry is seasonality. So during the summertime is when the consumption is at its highest for most deli. For things like bacon, sausages, ham consumption, it's mostly centered around the summertime, right? That's also, conversely, that's when our supply is at the lowest. So that's what's going to cause the volatility in the pricing. So we can do a lot of different things with these guys to help increase their capacities by bringing, without a brick and mortar expansion or without adding people, by bringing part of their process into our facility and be able to kind of move forward with it. So have them be able to accommodate for their seasonality and not have to have idle capacity during the year. They can actually have lower capacity throughout the year by us being able to push a ready-to-use item, taking a step out of their process, whether it's speeding things up so curing meats is a big deal. And there's not really a way to accelerate the curing of meats. It's, the old-fashioned way. It's just adding salt and sugar into a meat, and that takes time. So if we're able to do that on our side and send it to them, we can take advantage of the transit time in between and have the product ready to use at the time when it hits their dock and it's ready to go.
You said something a minute ago that we can relate significantly to our industry, and I imagine most people that watch this will be able to relate it to. As you talked earlier about the pressure on pricing from large competitors in the industry, but then conversely, you talked about at your size, you have the ability to be nimble.
Yep.
And we see that there's a ton of consolidation in our industry. There's a ton of consolidation in all industry with private equity and all the things. And I think for everybody that's listening to this and taking things away, like that is a really powerful thing to be able to say is we're nimble. We can make decisions on the fly. We can do things that the bigger competitors maybe wouldn't even think about or just can't get through the red tape to do. And
Exactly.
so we use that word a lot when we're talking about, the attributes of our company, the nimbleness and the quick decision making. And so it's just interesting that you said that. I don't know if there's a question in this necessarily other than a comment. And I think something for those that watch to absorb that, because you should be proud of that as small business owners in America to say, look, we can make quick decisions. It is a strength and we can be nimble. So just a comment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, making quick decisions is paramount. Because if your customer comes to you with a problem, that problem's yesterday. Like they needed an answer yesterday, like to get going. So
true.
So if you're the first one to say yes, you can have your foot in the door. Like the door's already open. It's just getting through.
So hard for big organizations. To make quick decisions.
Yeah, and I have sympathy for the folks, and sympathy and empathy for folks who are in those positions too. I guess I think we're the advantage in the United States in a lot of we have very similar businesses. These large scale companies that are, say you're a publicly traded, huge business. I struggle to see where the incentive is for certain employees to stick their necks out on the line. If the upside is your company makes $1 million and you bust your tail to make that happen, and the downside is you lose your job, obviously you don't take that risk. Like you back
no
off.
Risk
and
reward that there is a small business entrepreneur.
Yeah, I mean the entrepreneurial spirit gets stifled, which is 100% what the foundation of your company was.
Exactly
your dad
right.
taking a massive risk.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
And that's what entrepreneurs do, and that's how
That's a great point. Yeah.
builders, makers, doers exist. Somebody took a risk.
Exactly.
And again, that starts to get suppressed and stifled in those situations. It's
I'm
unfortunate.
impressed you wove that in. That's
Like
good.
that?
Yeah, it makes total sense. You're exactly right. Like from a base of business, that's everything we're built on. My personal opinion, that's American exceptionalism.
100%.
Because you're allowed to do that. In the United
Literally
States.
the American dream.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So then, just to kind of, wrap us up here, or last topic, I think that we talked. You hit on this a little bit already, but I'm just curious how you guys are approaching it. It's kind of the same thing as how do you make money, but what are your biggest challenges? And again, it's not always what you think about at the outset when you're an outsider looking into the business. And I know that you guys, obviously, a large part of your business is how you're able to get people to do the work.
Absolutely.
And, I think you've talked a little bit about the challenges there, but dive into that just a bit more, because you brought up a couple things that I thought were interesting before we even
Yeah, for sure. So our industry is manually intensive. There's no doubt about it. There always has been, since I can recall, and it's really accelerating, a press to automate. The entire industry is pushing to automate, which I think is great. I'm modestly bearish on the meatpacking to be one of the early adopters of what's going on, because there's so much capital tied up in these large facilities and the way they do things. If there's some sort of interruption because the automation's not working, it shuts down the plant.
Yeah.
So that the continuous flow of operations is critically important. So to retrofit, large scale, comparative industry would be like surgical stuff, how that's really being automated quickly, but that's all done small scale individually. They're working on just you. They're not going through and just hitting all of us quickly. So I'm modestly bearish on that in terms of being able to automate quickly. I think our industry is going to be one of the last adopters. Whoever figures out is going to make an obscene amount of money.
Yeah, totally.
For sure. And it's going to be a huge risk. But I'm modestly bearish in terms of it happening quickly. So with that said, people are going to be our biggest concern kind of moving forward. We mentioned a little bit before this thing started, with the current political climate and the shutting down of the borders currently, that the new waves of migration into the U.S. has become, or will be, a challenge for us in the immediate future. So in the meatpacking in the United States, the history has always been that it's a first-generation American's job. So go back 100 years, it was the Polish, it was the Germans, it was the Italians, it was the Irish working in these facilities. Then there was a long stretch where it was the Hispanics. And then most recently, we've seen a lot of migrants from Southeast Asia. We're really starting to see a lot from Sub-Saharan Africa. And in my opinion, on immigration is we need immigrants in the United States. We always have. We are a nation of immigrants. Absolutely. Does it need to be orderly and have rules to it? 100%. That's incredibly important. So I don't know if I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth on that, but we have to have migration into the United States for a lot of the jobs that we have. But we do need to know who's coming in. So it's definitely going to be a balancing act. The previous administration, it seems like the doors were wide open. We had stacks of applications. We had our choice. We had our pick of the litter. Since probably April or May, it's really tightened up quite a bit. We're fortunate to be in Omaha as opposed to being in a very, a county of 5,000 people or whatever. Where those folks, I think, are really in a lot of trouble. But finding that, I'll call it skilled labor is the other component that, from a longer term perspective, I'm very concerned about. Finding electricians, finding mechanics.
I agree,
I mean, if kids end up listening to this, you can be handsomely rewarded
Oh my
being
goodness,
an electrician or having skill sets like that. We're ammonia engineers. That's a massive, important thing in our industry. That there's the shortage is so big.
Existed,
No, right.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's wildly like we're federally registered in the amount of ammonia we have at our facility. If we had like an ammonia, if you think catastrophic, we could clear out a city mile. Like a square mile. Oh yeah, I don't know if you've ever been exposed to ammonia. It's not fun. No, it literally takes the breath out of your body, and it's it's a massively important position from an economics perspective because you use ammonia because it's the most economically advantageous way to cool large scale or large facilities. And then from a safety perspective, you have to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like you make a mistake and you can put people's lives on the line immediately. So it's a critically important role for us, and it's something that people are there have been fewer and fewer people over the last several decades entering that field.
Yeah.
And
I wonder how many people listening or watching this are going to Google schooling for ammonia engineers.
For ammonia engineers, yeah, exactly. So we're working with Metro Community College and like the trade schools, trying to come up with a pipeline of folks. But it's a challenge. There's no doubt that specific part of our thing. And also, as we go towards automation, those jobs are only going to grow, right? So you replace 10 people, but you're adding 2 highly skilled people.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge.
Yeah, I mean it is interesting. Like I have 2 college age, about to be. My youngest a senior. That conversation has come up so much recently, not with them necessarily because of what they want to do, but like their friends and their friend group is the trades and how important it is to keep people, and that's the audience of this, how important it is to keep people focused on that. And what just highlighted is like a peel back of the cover to look inside and say, wow, there are these nuanced things that need to happen in order for, ham to get across the world.
Yeah, exactly. You have to get food onto people's plates.
Yeah.
There's all these ancillary steps in between that are building blocks that people don't think about. There's a massive pyramid that we're standing on top of, trying to make it happen.
Super interesting.
Yeah, and from an entrepreneurial perspective, your younger kids out there, I mean, I think there's plenty of opportunity for those people to go out and start their own businesses.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether it's a consulting role, whether you're a third party service provider, there's a wild amount of opportunity there. I mean, to me, honestly, if I was a 22-year-old looking to do something, I would love to pick a craft or a trade and become an electrician and then go out and start your own business and go on top of it. That opportunity is there because I think the barrier to entry is low and the demand is massive.
It's huge. Yeah, it's kind of been fun to see that shift back a little bit. You're seeing a lot of entrepreneurs that are buying, boring businesses.
Right.
And I'm doing air quotes for those listening, but because they're like, it's their opportunity is massive. Number one, they're stable, solid businesses that have a lot of demand and that aren't going to be disrupted, frankly, for quite a while.
Right. Yeah, it's an opportunity to get rich slowly.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's no better way to do that. Having a stable business that is just, it's coming in year after year. Obviously, I'm making it sound like it's all easy. There's obviously challenges to it from personnel because those folks are still going to have to go out and hire their own certified trade people underneath them to go. But there's such an opportunity out there for folks in that world.
Yep, totally agree. Well, this has been great, man. I think it's been fun to just learn more about you guys. That
went quick.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah,
I feel like a repeat, a return.
Sure.
There's always on the docket here because that was really interesting. I think there's so many things that we could dive deeper into that are fascinating and I think would be of interest to those that watch and listen to this. So yeah, it was really fun.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I was entertained.
Yeah, good.
100%.
Good deal, yeah. No,
appreciate your time, dude.
Absolutely. If I could leave anybody with any pieces of advice on this one thing that often gets mentioned at our work is what gets measured gets done. Yeah. So like I mentioned earlier about knowing your costs and things like that. So you really need to be hyper concerned about measuring everything your company does. Yeah. And I think that's the easiest way to profitability and being able to stand on your own 2 feet and sustainability.
I think that's a great takeaway because I would agree. Every business that applies to every business.
It does. It's universal.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks again. I think this was a great conversation. It was fun, and we'll catch everybody on the next episode.
All right. Thanks for thanking me, guys.
It was fun.
Thank you.